Hi guys, my name is Brooke and I'm going to be going over our methodology and results sections of our study. First, we used an individual-based meta-analysis. We made a list of 100 serial killers that fit within our operational definitions, and they had to be within the US in the last 100 years. And then by using a random number generator, we selected 21 of them and gathered data from publicly released substantiated information. This was done by using local news, journal articles, books, court rulings, prosecutorial notes, police records, and any other documentation available to the public. We collected data through the use of a shared Google spreadsheet. Our variables included age, race, sex, duration of killing, confirmed convictions, presence of childhood trauma, subtypes of childhood trauma, Rappaport typology, and any other additional information that could be relevant, such as victims and purpose, their occupation at the time. Our spreadsheet was used not only to collect but also to quantify variables and then transfer that data into SPSS and Excel. Variables that were already quantifiable, such as age and number of convictions, were left as is, and then variables that were not in quantifiable form, such as presence of childhood trauma and subtypes of trauma, we coded them for a statistical analysis. So for example, 0 equaled trauma unknown, where 1 equaled trauma present. And then for our subtypes, 0 equaled abandonment or negligence, 1 equaled emotional abuse, 2 verbal abuse, 3 sexual abuse, 4 physical abuse, and 5 other. Once all of our variables were numerically coded into both SPSS and Excel, we performed statistical analysis tests. We ran frequency tests on SPSS and gathered the average, mean, median, mode, range, standard deviation, and variance. And then we ran Pearson's R correlation coefficient tests on Excel to detect if there were any relationships between variables, specifically subtypes of childhood trauma and Rappaport typologies. So for the results section, I'm just going to run through the means of our variables and then elaborate on our most important ones, and then we have some correlations. So the average age at which serial killers committed their first murder ranged from 18 to 40, with a mean of 29.5. 76.2% of our sample was Caucasian, while 23.8% were African American. We didn't have individuals of any other ethnicity. We thought this was going to be a huge limitation, but when we compared our results to other studies, we found that other studies had similar findings. 90.5% were male, while 9.5% were female. The duration of killing period, or how long the individual's killing spree lasted, ranged from 1 to 23 years, with a mean of 9.14. The total number of convicted murders ranged from 3 to 48, with a mean of 10.57. And for our Rappaport typology, which I'm not sure if that's been mentioned, but Rappaport is a notable type of typology that designates serial killers into certain categories. So for our study, if an individual resembled more than just one, they were categorized into both. Sexually sadistic killers had 61.9% of the sample. Spree killers accounted for 33.3%. Psychotic killers were 19%, custodial for 9.5%, and then functionaries of organized crime were 0 because they were purposefully excluded by our team. Functionaries of organized crime are assassins and hitmen, and for our operational definition, those didn't count within our motives of serial killers. We recorded childhood trauma in 2 different ways. First was if it was present or not. 85.7% had experienced one or multiple types of trauma, and it remained unknown or absent if 14.3% had experienced any form of childhood trauma. And then we decided to more thoroughly define childhood trauma by categorizing traumatic experiences into 6 different categories. 71.4% had experienced emotional abuse, 38.1% experienced verbal abuse, 23.8% experienced sexual abuse, 23.8% experienced physical abuse, 14.3% experienced abandonment or negligence, and 9.5% experienced an other type of trauma that wasn't categorizable. Then we ran our Pearson's correlation test to see if there were any correlations between the subtypes of childhood trauma and rapport typologies in an effort to answer if how an individual was abused could possibly reflect the incentives and behaviors of serial murder. We found numerous correlations, but only one was statistically significant, which was physical trauma and the sexually sadistic killer typology. They were found to be moderate to highly positively correlated with an R of 0.44. Then we had other not statistically significant correlations that were low to moderate, including abandonment and the sexually sadistic typology, presence of childhood trauma and the spree killer typology, verbal trauma and the spree killer typology, and the other trauma and the psychotic killer typology.